Start recording. All right. Welcome to our second class. And tonight we're going to talk about a couple different things. Probably I have too much I'm going to try to cover, I'm sure, but we're going to do our best. I'm going to start with talking about emotional development. And that's going to be, and all these slides are on Moodle if you want to grab them. I'm going to show them either way, so you can grab them if you want. It's the exact same slides. I'm going to start with that, and then we're going to transition to discussion about childhood, and then we're going to have a couple of different breakout group times too. And at the end of class, I will stay on. I can stay on longer tonight because I don't have a class after. So anyone that has questions at the end of class, and I'll stop a little bit early too. Anyone that has questions, I'll stick around and answer questions as long as you guys have questions. I'll do that at the end. I do want to say the first assignment's due Saturday. You can turn it in anytime Saturday. Excuse me. And I've looked at a couple of people have turned them in. They look good so far. I've had a couple of questions like, just like, hey, if we didn't, like, the forum discussion is talking about which life stage you chose. If you chose to do review, connect, reflect sections in the first three chapters, there won't be like technically life stages that your life developmental stages you chose. That's okay. Just kind of write about just your reflections is fine. Excuse me. I put that in there because there are some people that have written about like skipped ahead in the book, which you can do. Some people have done that. And also some questions about the actual answering the questions in those sections. Like a couple of people asked about, like, the question states like name, XYZ thing from the chapter, and wanting to know if you just name it as a list or if you need to name it and then define each. If it says name it, you just name it. If it says define it, you need to name it and define it. So just literally just follow what the questions are, and you should be fine. This first assignment, I will get back to you pretty quickly, probably by Monday. That's my goal. That's what I'm shooting for, so that you'll know kind of pretty quick, like, hey, if something was wrong, you need to edit it. I'm going to give everyone a chance to edit stuff and turn it back in if you want. If you don't get the grade you want the first time, you can edit it and then turn it back in, and I'll take it, just so you kind of understand what to expect, because I realize every professor is different in terms of what they're looking for and what to expect. And so I'm going to try to be fair and do that. And I think I said this, you can turn it in anytime Saturday. And you can, I know that technically you have, a week to do the forum discussions. You can do those anytime. You can post your forum answer, just or discussion answer on there anytime. You can do it. I've actually had students in the past that have done all three of these assignments at the same time, which is fine, but just don't turn them all in on the same day. Turn them in at the respective places. Otherwise, you'll get zeros in some of those days, and then people freak out. And I don't want you to freak out. So anyway, you don't have to do that, but some people have done that in the past. Okay. And I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna stick around and answer any questions that you guys have at the end. And I'll stay on as long as we need to then. Okay, and I apologize about my voice. I don't know why, but with my clients this week, I've talked a lot, and I'm not sure why. So I'm losing my voice a little bit. So we'll see. I think I'll be okay. But let me pull up a couple of things here. Okay. Let's talk about emotions. And like I said, the PowerPoint slides are on Moodle. You can grab those if you want. I'm going to share. This first presentation is pretty short. Like there's only 11 slides. It's not super long. Let me get over here. I don't know why this does this. There we go. Okay. Okay. So when we talk about emotions, one of the reasons I started doing this is because when we work with clients clinically, whether you're in a school setting, in a counseling setting, you're one of the things you're definitely going to be working through is how people are feeling, and our emotions can really do a lot of things to us and can cause a lot of things to happen to us and around us and between us and our relationships. And so I start early, just kind of talking through. I'm going to give you, this is seriously like a 10,000 foot view of emotional development. Not like we're not going to get in the weeds right now. I just want to give you some just general information, just so that you know some of this you might already know and might be repeat. But these are just things that I think are helpful to know just about emotions. And specifically tonight, as we talk about childhood, we will talk about emotions like guilt and shame and how they develop and how they first come on board in our lives and in human beings' lives. We're going to talk about that too, kind of separately, and what that means for like our development of a self or a concept of ourself. We're going to talk about that too. And there's a lot of things that obviously impact our lives in terms of our environment, and emotions are things that usually come about as a result of things in our environment or things around us, whether it's interactions or experiences and things like that. So the first thing to think about is if we, and I could, and you guys can do this too. You can Google right now emotion wheels, and you'll get like 80 emotions on a big huge wheel that gives you tons of choices to identify your emotions. And I actually do that with clients sometimes, especially clients that have like maybe blunted emotion, like have decided somewhere in their life to just shove and stuff all their emotions down and don't really even know how to talk about them. Maybe they know like I'm angry or I'm sad, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's something else. So I'll use those big, huge emotion wheels to kind of help people see, hey, there's lots of emotions. And I do that for two reasons. One, just sometimes seeing it helps people name them. But two, it's okay that we have emotions. And I know that sounds weird, but we need to normalize the fact that everybody has emotions. For example, if I said right now, and you can do this if you want, if I said right now, write on a piece of paper anything you're feeling, you're probably feeling something. You would write it down. And then if I asked you again at the end of class, I'd say, hey, how are you feeling? The odds are you're going to feel maybe different, right? So our emotions come and go too. One of the things that I like to think about, and this comes from my training with emotionally focused therapy, well, and other things, but we can think about secondary emotions and primary emotions. Secondary emotions are those things that we usually a little easier to identify mostly. A lot of times we can see them too a little bit easier. And they're things that can come to us quicker. Primary emotions are a little different, not that we can't name them, but the primary emotions are typically what we want to address clinically. We want to get to where we are talking about primary emotions. Fear, for example. Fear is a very powerful emotion, and fear is very normal and natural because our brain will really use fear for lots of different things. Feeling alone, feeling abandoned, feeling sad, feeling hurt, feeling joy. Those things we kind of want to, if we can get to some of those primary emotions, it really helps us help our clients start to process. Not that secondary emotion processing is bad, it's always good. That's a good thing. But when we get down to the primary emotion and we help our clients actually identify that, this is kind of important. Not kind of, this is really important. Not only identify them, but process them and do something about it. Okay. We need to help clients do something about it. It's okay as a clinician to say, hey, that sounds really hard, or that sounds like that's really frustrating, or sounds like a really helpless situation. That's good. We need to do that with them. It helps build rapport. It helps them know that we're actively listening. At the same time, we need to be able to say something or help them do something to work through it and process it and do something about it, which sometimes means sitting in it and letting us sit in it with them. Sometimes that's part of it. Sometimes it's addressing something that they're thinking as a result of what they're feeling. So, and there's multiple ways that we can do that. We're going to talk about all those things as we go through. But I want to look at one, and I actually just did this with a client 30 minutes ago. Literally this graphic. Anger is super common. Like, we can talk about anger. It's a super common emotion. Anger is one of those things that everyone usually can say we can identify. Usually yelling is anger and crying is sad, right? I mean, we can identify those pretty quickly. And a lot of clients, especially if they're kind of blunting their emotions, they know what anger is. They can name anger. And a lot of times they're coming because maybe they have an anger problem, they say. Well, anger is made up of multiple things, not just like what you see at the top, right? So if you think about it as an iceberg, anger is made up of the things you see at the top, for sure, behaviors. Sometimes lack of behavior can show anger as well. But the things that are underneath it are the things that are really powering anger. That's the stuff you want to get to. And here's the thing about anger, just like all emotions, they're okay and they happen. They don't have a faucet to turn off and on unless you want to turn them all off. When we want to shove our emotions down, we shove all of them down, positive and negative, not just negative. We shove them all down. That's just how they work. Emotions happen to us. Okay. Thoughts, we have a little bit more control over. We can change our thoughts if we want. Behaviors, we have choices. Okay, so emotions happen to us. We don't always have a choice of how that emotion happens. Our thoughts, we definitely have a little bit more choice, and we can decide to change them, challenge them, or allow them to just be there. Behaviors, we definitely have choices over, even when we're angry. A lot of times, and this is a clinical thing now, so we're talking clinically. When we think about anger management, quote unquote, what we're talking about is not controlling anger, because you don't control anger. You try to choose better reactions to your anger. If I get angry, which everyone does, then I have a choice to throw the chair through the window, or yell at someone, or take a break and walk away, or talk about it, or not say anything. You know, you have choices that you can do. And my anger is my anger, and my reaction is definitely my reaction, not anybody else's. No one makes me react anyway. I do that myself. That's very important. And here's why. There's a couple of things that are important about that. The first thing is, if you think about starting in childhood, kids that grow up in a household that's volatile, and not volatile, it could be just sometimes volatile. And no parent's perfect. No household's perfect. I'm not talking about I'm talking about if someone grows up in an abusive, volatile household, and that's something that you learn and you see and you experience as a child, a lot of times you take on the idea that you are responsible for what? That person's anger, that person's blow up, that person's yelling, right? So let's stop for a second and think logically about that. As adults, we can look back and go, if that's true, As a child, like an 8 or 10 or 15-year-old kid, what you're really saying is that child has so much superpower over your reaction, they can make you do anything they want you to do. That's what you're saying, which logically doesn't make any sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, now I'm saying that out loud, knowing that it's easy for me to say that out loud. It's really hard when you start talking about it with clients. So that's why I start with things like this. I like to use pictures a lot. That's one of the great things I love about virtual. I can pull up pictures and show them things and talk them through things. So I do a lot of visual things with people. But when we talk about emotions, anger is no exception. Emotions happen to us. We definitely have, we can challenge our thoughts, and we have choices with our behavior, even if we're really angry. Okay. Now, when we talk about early development, early childhood, and early childhood development is, you know, even in infancy, coming into toddlerhood, we have pride, shame, embarrassment, guilt. We start really knowing what those are, and a lot of times we know from the faces of our caregivers. Sometimes we start figuring those things out, or from context, we can figure those things out. Guilt is one of the first emotions we feel as human beings. They're like what's called self-conscious emotions, and we actually need those to happen to help us know that we're alive, like we have a self. And I know that sounds kind of weird. We don't, obviously, as early childhood, we don't think, oh, I'm guilty, therefore I am. That's not what we think. It's just a normal, natural process that happens. That's why I tell clients all the time, or I talk about guilt, like human beings don't need help generating guilt. We can do it on our own. We don't need help with it. We can generate guilt like crazy. Like, I don't need to help any of you generate guilt over anything. You can just do it yourself. We're good at it because we start doing it really early. Some guilt is okay, because some guilt will push us to do something to fix a relationship, or do something to apologize, or do something to make sure that something gets better, right? Like, there's some guilt that's not bad, but then there's bad guilt that's like turns into shame. Like, not only am I wrong, there's something wrong with me. And that's what, when clients come to you, you want to start distinguishing between. So this is kind of how I view it. There's things that happen to us in our life, but not really because of us. And there's things that happen to us because of us, right? Like, there's things that happen to us, and it's not our fault that it happened to us. We didn't have a choice. We didn't have control over it. It happened to us. Maybe we feel guilt about it, and then we think we should have done something about it, or we should have done something different. That's the shame aspect coming in, versus something happens to us and it really is kind of because of us, like we really did that. And that guilt that we're feeling is okay to feel. But again, like I said before, we need to teach people to do something with it. Okay. One of the things that we know about expressing emotions, and especially these self-conscious emotions, is they're highly influenced by parental responses to behavior. We're actually going to talk about this a little bit more here in a second, because that's kind of a big deal. Okay. What that means is how parents respond to the behavior of a child really has a big influence on how they express, feel, process those emotions. Okay. Again, don't hear me say parents need to be perfect and figure it out. No one's perfect. No parent's a robot. Everyone messes up. This is not what that's about. But we're going to talk about that one specifically here in a second, in a couple of different contexts. So kids have an understanding of emotions when the more they understand and can be aware and kind of name, it helps them in their social relationships a lot of times. Most of the time by age 5, they have kind of a growing awareness of this need to also learn how to manage them the best they can. Now, manage is a broad term. Manage can mean shove down, don't think about. Manage can mean talk about. Manage can mean lots of things. And we're going to talk, again, we'll talk about some of these in terms of like clinically speaking. But by age 5, kids kind of know, hey, maybe I need to manage this somehow. Either they know how or they don't. And again, that goes back to some of the interactions with their caregivers too has a big influence on that. I'm gonna make sure. Okay. When we think about regulating emotions, and we're going to talk about emotional regulation probably like every class, we'll talk about it. Because emotional regulation is something that is also an executive function for human beings. It's part of the executive functioning that we have. So the ability to, again, name it, be aware of it, kind of manage it, regulate it. One of the best approaches to help kids now is this idea of parental emotional coaching. And there's actually a couple of good programs that do that. John Gottman's group has a parental emotional coaching. I think it's a set of seminars. I know it's online, it's digital, that are really good at training this kind of using this concept. Sometimes people think it's kind of like, it doesn't have anything to do with like a lack of boundaries and just letting people feel whatever they feel and it's okay. That's not what it's about. It's actually helping parents know how to help their kids regulate their emotions, which is really important. If you learn how to regulate your emotions and then you practice doing it as a skill over years, you get really good at it. Your spouse will be very glad that you did that. It's very helpful. Then your kids will be glad that you did that. It's something that can be passed down. Regulating emotion or modulating them, it really has a lot of benefits. I'm gonna jump over to a couple of things. We're gonna talk some of the stuff we're gonna talk about in a second. We're gonna talk about that one in a second. I want to talk about this real quick. So, in working with couples, I actually used this week with a couple I'm working with because they were actually doing a really good job of this, and I showed them what they were doing because they were doing a really good job of this. Emotions can have a triggering event, an environment that's triggering. Something can trigger something. And what it's triggering is that primary emotion. If we feel overwhelmed and we don't really feel safe to share it in the environment we're in, then we won't. And secondary emotions will tend to come to the top. Like if you go to the right, that orange secondary emotion square will tend to go to that anger, hatred, numbing, shut down place. We become very narrow and rigid in our emotional regulation. And we kind of become protective. Now, I'm not saying this, if this happens one time, this is mostly like this is happening, through cycles and through patterns. That will typically lead to this attacking, criticizing, demanding, blaming, withdrawing, minimizing behavior, especially in couples. And this is not dependent upon gender, doesn't matter. This is a human being thing. It's what human beings do. If, however, that primary emotion comes up after a trigger and they feel safe talking about it and can be vulnerable and transparent about it, and it's taken with safety and in a non-judgmental way, then there's a connection that forms almost instantly. And then they can start to actually talk about what they really need or what they really want or what's going on. Okay. It actually you start to turn to each other instead of away from each other. It looks great on paper. It's really hard to do if you're not practicing it. I literally spend like almost my whole effort and energy with couples trying to do this, help people with this. This comes a lot from attachment theory as well. Basically having that safe spot that you can turn to and rely on. It doesn't mean perfect, and it doesn't mean people can't be upset. It doesn't mean we always have to agree. It means actually when things are really intense, you still turn towards each other. That's really safe, ultimately. Okay. Again, I've used this with couples. This is just an example of kind of how, certain patterns work and what they look like. Now, I'm gonna give you a quick super synopsis of a couple of things. We can always think about emotions as data, not directives. They give us information about what's going on. They don't tell us what to do. They try to, but they don't have to be in charge. In reality, they're not really in charge. Our thoughts are in charge. But sometimes the thought and the emotion happen so quickly, they seem to be enmeshed together or really closely integrated. We have to be able to pull them apart a little bit to see what's going on. And that's where we come in. We can help clients slow down a little bit and try to find out what's going on. The emotions themselves don't have like memories. They don't remember where they happened. They just have a context that they live in. Right. So for example, if I'm 8 years old and I have a sad moment, I can be 48 and have a sad moment. Totally different context. Same emotion. Right. One of the things about one of the things that trauma does, not all the things, but one of the things that trauma does, especially, this concept is very much alive because trauma wants to pull us back. That when we feel that emotion wants to pull us back to the traumatic event, continue to pull us back to the past. What we do with trauma therapy, one of the focuses is to help us stay in the present while we're experiencing the trauma from the past. The more we can stay present, we start to pull that emotion towards us in the present. It actually starts to heal things from the inside out. I just gave you like a super synopsis of like mounds of research, but that's kind of what happens with emotions when it comes to trauma. So again, primary, secondary, they don't have a memory. They live in a context, and they happen, and it's okay. Sometimes helping clients just realize that their emotions are okay is like eye-opening. Like it's called normalizing, right? When we normalize something, it really helps people feel like they're not going crazy and that they're okay. All right. Now, any question? If you ask questions, just make sure you unmute yourself. But any questions about any of this stuff? And we're gonna talk more about some of this as we go through the class. But I just want to kind of give you an overview of this. Okay. All right. Here's what I want to do now. I'm going to put you guys in breakout groups. Okay. I'm going to put you guys into groups. And this one's easy. This is no brainer. This will be easy. All I want you to do is talk to each other about, hey, do you have a favorite stage of your development? Or is what you're in now your favorite stage? And why? That's it. All right. I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. Let me get the groups going. And you should see your assignments now. Y'all's group gets 100. Y'all got back first.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought it was going to kick us out.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. All right. I'm sure someone got cut off. That's the one downside of the groups. Anyone want to share what their favorite stage is, even if it's now? And you gotta tell why. You can't just say the stage. You gotta say why.
I would share out. I was telling the group that early childhood is my favorite because it seemed like when that stage, everything is an adventure for that person, for the individual. Everything is new. You have no fear, you have no knowledge of things. So even and I was sharing with them, like with my grandchildren, one of my kids was getting out of my bed, and it's kind of a high bed, and they would hold on to the blanket just to climb out of the bed, having no fear of this big bed. So I think early childhood is more of a fun stage. They don't know anything, and they're just looking forward to see what's new. What'll happen if I do this? They don't know that if I touch this, it's going to burn. They don't know if I go down this here, I'm going to fall. So everything's an adventure for them.
Yeah, that's good. Did you like that stage yourself?
I'm pretty sure I probably did. I like adventure now, but I still have I have a fear factor. Now my heart beats when I go into a dark room. As a kid, like I have my grandkids, like I have a kind of a big home. They will walk in the dark and have no fear of it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Anybody else?
I'll share.
Oh, excuse me.
I'm sorry. I said right now is my favorite stage. I mean, I had a lot of fun when I was a kid, but now I feel like I have my grandkids and I'm retired and working on a second career, and I feel like a lot of the stress is gone as far as trying to make ends meet and things like that. I feel like that I've worked hard and now I'm enjoying. So this is my favorite.
Awesome. Sandra, you were going to share too.
Yeah, I was just going to share that this stage is probably going to be, I chose this as my best stage when I was, with the exception of when I was in the military and when I had my children. I was shared with the group that I cannot remember being happy ever in my entire life until like now, since I had my boys, and I'm just looking forward to them getting some wives, give me some grandkids. And until I die, I'm happy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sad you haven't been happy.
Yeah, but I did put in my paper, because I don't want you to think I'm some nut that's running around with a gun. The thing is, these classes is really helping me a lot. It's really making me just really reflect back on my life. I mean, and just in general. And I did tell them I did oversharing my paper, and I had to delete a lot of stuff because I was like, okay, he is not caring about any of this. But it helped me. I mean, it helped me. But you'll see when I say it.
Good. Well, that's what the assignment's for, is for you, not me.
Yeah, it's
glad.
awesome.
Good. Programs like this will make you think about yourself for sure. It's kind of designed that way. So good.
I think I want to share something because I think our development, our growth also depends on where you are, or where you are, the environment around you. Probably somebody like me who is born and raised in Africa, Kenya in Africa, my growing is different from some of you that are born and raised in America. And so the circumstances that are surrounding a child growing up, one might give you a negative approach of life, or it might give you a positive approach of life. Sometimes we say that when children are brought up in a rich family, they don't become responsible, but some of them do. And then the other side, you say that when they are brought up in a poor place, they sometimes develop being independent and being able to develop themselves responsible, and that might not. But both ways, I feel it's like when we say that you have two kids from one family and one is a drunkard, the other one is not. And when you ask one who is drunkard, man, why are you an alcoholic? He said, because my dad was. And then the other one, when you ask him, he say, oh, I cannot because I don't, because my father was. So to me, mine growing up, what I feel impacted me a lot is the teenage life, like from 12 years to 18, 19 there. That's the time I was trying to think, whom will I be? Can I work very hard so that I cannot remain in this humble family circumstance? If I don't work very hard, I'll remain there forever and the life will not be good. And so that freaking of mind and making me to think about 10 years down the line, I feel I liked it because it motivated me to be whom I am today.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think a lot of what you're saying, culture, for sure, our culture has a lot to say with how we develop. The debate between nature and nurture has been going on for a long time, and both are important. And I'll just tell you, I come down in the middle. I say I think nature and nurture both matter for lots of reasons. One example you just used is, say kids grow up in the same house and one goes one way and one goes another. We have genetic markers inside of all of us that sometimes get tripped first on because of environment and some don't. We have the exact same markers, genetically speaking, in all our families. And so some of those genetic markers get turned on, some don't. And some of that depends on environment. A lot of it depends on environment. We're going to talk about all those things, but I think it's important for us to think about all the things you guys just said. Whether this stage is, you like this stage now, or you liked a stage previous to now. Your environment, your culture, your ethnicity, your gender, your sexual orientation, all of those play a factor in your development, all of them. And we're going to talk about each of those kind of as we go through this course, and you will in all your courses as well. And the one thing that has probably been pretty consistent now for a while, centuries, is development. Like human development has been pretty consistent. There's been some changes, obviously, over time, but our culture and our environment has changed more rapidly than our development has changed. And we'll talk about that a lot more specifically when we talk about adolescence. The adolescent environment right now is drastically different than 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and way different than 50 years ago. And it will continue to be that way. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things. I also just like to know what people's favorite, and I ask my clients that too. What's the favorite time in your life and why? That'll tell you a lot about people and tell you a lot about where they're coming from. And it's not always necessarily the time of life where they didn't have trouble or didn't have issues. Sometimes those times are actually favorite times of people. All right, I'm going to jump over to, okay. If any of you have ever had me in class before, you know this, but if you've never had me in class, if I don't watch it, I will go down rabbit trails and we won't get anything done. So I'm going to do my best not to do that. I try to stay as organized as I can. Okay. There's a couple of big concepts I want to hit when we talk about childhood. This idea of self is very important. How self develops in humankind. It's basically just kind of like understanding yourself. Then you can have an understanding of other people. If you don't really do these stages like this, it makes it hard when we start talking about your identity, because you don't have a view of yourself first. Then you don't have a view of your concept, like self-concept. And then it's hard to have a view of your self-identity. So it's kind of important to go through these stages. All of the theories that you guys are going to read about in the first couple of chapters, we're not going to go through all of those, but I've given you a document that kind of lines out, like gives you some highlights of them too. All the theories that we are reading about in this class are doing their best to try to explain human development, whether it's cognitively, emotionally, physically. The physical pieces we kind of all know about. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the physical development of us as people. I'm going to spend more time on the cognitive and the emotional development sides of things, and also kind of the social pieces as well. And that's kind of how the book is developed or designed. You'll see as you get into, especially the third chapter and on, you'll see how the author basically tries to separate, like, okay, in each stage, there's these biological or physical development, cognitive development, and social emotional development. He kind of tries to organize it that way. And I think that's helpful to kind of think about it like that. So I'm going to try to talk about it that way too. But this idea of self, and when I talked about earlier with this idea that when we first start feeling guilt, that's when we first start feeling that we are a self, like we're a person. That's very important. Having an awareness of ourselves, having self-understanding, and then things like physical activities are super important in early childhood, like play. There have been, I don't even know how many studies, a lot of studies in the last 15 years about play. This is going to sound really weird. There's this idea or concept called planned boredom, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's take everything away that's super stimulating in terms of screens and let kids play. Because what it does is it turns on a different part of their brain, basically a creative part, and allows them to just kind of do that and play in a bored way. In other words, it's like, it's okay to be bored, and being bored's not bad. And there's actually studies that are being done in those areas. There's been several pretty big longitudinal studies that have been done by the World Health Organization, by the American Pediatric Association, the American Psychology Association have done several different studies about not just like screen time with kids, but just this idea, this concept of being bored and playing and creativity and things like that. And what they're also studying, which is important, is this idea of like making mistakes and not being corrected constantly, or not being what's called pre-corrected. In other words, let them figure some things out. Now, you're not going to let them run across the road in a busy street. I mean, or they're not going to let them, jump in a pool if they can't swim. Not that. I'm talking about like just little things it's very interesting that, like, generationally speaking, like probably up until the 90s, mid 90s, probably parenting was pretty different in terms of like just adult involvement. There wasn't a ton of adult involvement up until then, really. And then there started to be a lot more adult involvement in kids' lives, which is not a bad thing at all. It's just also, it meant over parenting in certain ways, not letting people fail. And that meant over time, what that means is you feel like you have to do everything right. You have to do everything perfect. And that becomes a subconscious thought in your brain. And we don't need help with that. We can do that ourselves. We don't need like extra help with that. And some of that's personality too, but learning things through experience is very important, and it kind of starts in childhood. And some of that can be obviously like still protected spaces to let them explore. But also kids start to learn this idea of emotions, like I said before, and that enables them to start to also see other perspectives. And that's kind of when it starts in early childhood, which is the beginnings of empathy, basically, starting to see things from another person's perspective. And that's very important to empathy as we get, as we grow and get older. There's a little stall out there in adolescence, and then it kind of kicks back in late adolescence, but it starts in childhood. I'm not gonna go, some of this I'm gonna skip around a little bit. Again, these slides are online. Let's talk about self-worth. This idea of the self is also where like self-esteem, self-concept, especially like foundationally speaking, with really good quality parent-child interactions, not perfect, just good quality interactions. They can start to kind of feel the self-worth and their esteem, and it starts to lean more towards the positive. It can be negative too. It's not always positive. There's going to be times where it's not stable, especially in childhood. Things are going to be a little unstable at times. Sometimes self-concept is also dependent upon environment, or dependent upon certain activities maybe that they're doing or not doing. Typically speaking, research tells us that kids that are higher in self-esteem do better in school. But inflated self-esteem, like too much self-esteem, kind of like distorts ability, and then they think maybe they can do anything. And then when they mess up, it's kind of hits them hard. So there's a little balance there. Honestly, I think a lot of that happens as they get out of childhood into adolescence too. This lower self-esteem, if that occurs, there's a lot of correlation to like obesity, anxiety, depression, suicide, things like that. Which again, we haven't even talked about adolescence, but this idea of self gets really shaken when we get into adolescence. So it's kind of like not starting all over, but a brand new stage. So you have to negotiate self-esteem again. You have to negotiate self-concept again. And we'll talk, and that's because it's kind of connected so closely to identity, which we'll talk about. This idea that we talked about self-regulation a little bit. This idea of being able to regulate your behavior, emotions, thoughts, behavior. One of the things about that's really important is how adults in their world, especially their caregivers, especially key attachment figures, how they respond to a behavior really matters. There was a little book written about, I don't even know how long, it's been a while now. I heard this guy speak and I bought his, 2007. There's a different version now, but Hal Runkle wrote this great it's a little bitty book called Screen Free Parenting. He's an LMFT. I think has done a great job. This is not it's interesting because it says parenting. Really, it's about adult or caregiver emotional regulation is what it is. He just packages it as it's parenting, basically. This book is super, super, super helpful because it's practical. And it goes off this theory that how parents react to behavior goes a long way towards self-concept, self-esteem, emotional regulation in the child. Not perfect reaction, but how they react. It does matter. Even if there's no reaction, or if there's no communication about it, keeping in mind that no reaction or no communication is still communication, right? And so that becomes very, very important. For example, this industry idea, like kids getting interested in how things are made. My little nephew, he's almost 4, was here. They live in North Carolina. They were here for like 6 or 7 days a couple of weeks ago. And he's definitely at the stage where it's like, why? Like, I want to know why. Like, everything's why, right? Like, I want to know, why is this happening? And where are you going? And why are you doing that? And why are you going out there? And what's out there? And can I go out there? And why can I not go out there? It's like, how many questions can you ask in 2 minutes? This kid can ask a ton of questions. Well, that's the stage he's in, right? Now I've got a couple of ways to respond to it. It's okay to say, put some boundaries and limits on it, but it depends on how you do it. It's how you react to it. And his parents do a good job of, they're very patient with him because he asks a ton of questions like that, but they're also very good at like directing him and letting him figure some things out too, which is really good. If you sometimes see that effort as mischief or making a mess or trying to be manipulative or trying to be annoying, like, which if you think about it, doesn't make sense. A 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old, that's not what they're not. Only psychopaths do that. Okay, psychopaths are intentionally manipulative, intentionally troublemaking, intentionally try to be divisive. Children, that's not how children are wired yet. But if they're viewed that way and you respond to them that way, then what are they going to do? They're going to become that way. That's what happens. I'm not saying that my little nephew's questions weren't annoying, because they were, especially when I was doing like 5 things at once. They're annoying. Now, I'm not his parent. It was easy for me to just kind of talk to him real quick and then leave, because I'm not his parent. It was way easier for me, right? Kids listen to other people besides their parent. That's very true. But my point about this is that how parents react to their behavior matters. And if you can have a little bit of emotional regulation yourself in reacting to them, that really helps. I'm not saying this because I think it's true. I'm telling you this from like mounds of research that tells us this is the best way to do it. This is the correlated most highly with secure attachment, a little higher self-esteem. Doesn't mean things are perfect, just means doing your best to keep in mind that basically from the time they're born until they can kind of be on their own, we're teaching them something, right? Kids don't know how to do anything. Like, we teach them everything. They don't know anything at all. They know how to breathe. They know how to eat. They know how to go to the bathroom. They know how to sleep. They know that stuff. They know how to grab stuff eventually, right? But they don't know, like, you have to teach them how to eat. Think about it. You teach them how to eat, teach them how to crawl, teach them how to walk, teach them how to talk. I mean, you teach them everything. So why would you not teach them how to respond? Why would you not teach them how to have emotional regulation, right? Does that make sense? Like, we're constantly, that's just part of development. Okay, I'm going to come in some of this I've already studied or talked about. Yeah, and young kids can experience tons of emotions during the day. I personally think every human being can. We have about 6,000 thoughts a day. Adults do. Kids probably have like 6,000 emotions during the day. Or at least it feels that way sometimes. And sometimes it depends on the emotions of other people too. They'll feed off that as well. And people in general tend to do that as well. If you are okay with expressing emotions, then that means you allow them to express all the emotions, not just the ones that are fun, right? I don't know about you guys, but I like a kid's like a laugh from a kid's, like, really kind of, it makes you smile because it feels good. But a cry is different, right? But they're both emotionally tied, and we have to be able to allow them to do both because they're natural. This is a natural part of their process. And this idea that, like, pride and guilt definitely become more common. But it's also, again, influenced by responses. And I'll just speak for myself. I mean, growing up where I grew up with my family, and at the time I grew up, was kind of, we didn't really talk about any of these things. I mean, no one was mean. I didn't have mean family. I didn't have bad experiences. Even my parents' divorce actually was pretty good. I mean, overall. But when we think about creating defensiveness in human beings, the quickest way to create defensiveness in any person is to use the word you and then fill in the blank. You should feel bad, or if you love me, you would do this, or you do this to me all the time. Any you statement will create instant defensiveness in human beings because it feels like a criticism, or it feels like we're being criticized. And criticism is typically this kind of like lack, or like an unmet need of some kind. And literally, if we kind of do that with children at this age, especially, defensiveness, they don't know that they're feeling defensive. They just know it's like, oh gosh, what did I do? Something's wrong with me. That's shame. And we don't like, that's not good. Now, does that mean we shouldn't point out things that they did wrong or correct them? No, absolutely we should. But there's ways to do it that are a little more helpful than not. And that's kind of all we're talking about. Okay. Now, this sounds great on paper, and it's really hard in the therapy room. And one of the reasons this is just my experience. In my experience, one of the reasons why it's difficult when we talk about parenting, like if an adult is having trouble with their kids, let's say, and they're really struggling, it's not usually because they don't love their kids. They always love their kids. They want what's best for them. Maybe they're tired. There's a lot going on. They're maybe tired, stressed out. But a lot of it's because they were parented a certain way. And if that went okay, they think their kids should be parented that way, but all of a sudden it's not working and they don't know another way to do it. And then they're helpless and frustrated and they take it out on their kids or their spouse or their work or whatever. Most of the time, that's what I experience. So the first thing is to kind of help to try and understand like how they were parented, right? Like what kind of parenting happened. And we're going to talk about parenting in a specific section here in a second, but just I want to bring this up because this is very important. And this theme of adult reaction is going to carry into adolescence as well. Some of the stuff I already talked about. Okay, I want to talk about a couple of things. Social emotional education programs, which I'm a fan of. They've been around now for a while. When I first started teaching, social emotional learning was kind of newish when I first started teaching. It was being taught, but it was still kind of new. I'm a fan of it. I think it's great. I think it helps with self-awareness, self-management. I think it helps with relationship skills. I think where it falls short, well, first of all, it's really hard when there's so many kids. That makes it hard to do. Kind of where it falls short is where I think where we can help pick up some slack is, I think it's great to have awareness of your emotion, be able to name your emotion, and to be able to sit in it a little bit and understand it. Even as a child, they can kind of understand, start naming emotions. You can do that as a kid. What we also need to do is come along behind them and go, now what? We need to fill in the now what. Don't let people just sit there and not know what to do. Okay, we need to help them sometimes. Sometimes that means brainstorming reactions or brainstorming other things to do. And sometimes some of the programs do a good job of the first part, but not always a good job of the back part. And that's because there's just so many kids that we're kind of talking about. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the same thing can be said of our cognitive, like our thought process, right? We can do something about our thought process. We can also teach what some cognitive distortions are on a basic level, even to kids, and help them start reframing thoughts. You can do the same thing as regulating emotion. It just takes effort and time. That's all. We're going to talk about stress in a whole other deal. I do want to talk about, oh my gosh, I always run out of time. Let's do this because I want to do another group here a second. So these two guys are in your book. This is an old, I think the chart doesn't look like this anymore. Probably looks different. I use this because Vygotsky and Piaget are, especially Piaget and Erikson, are like pretty big in the education world, and they're huge in human development. But but also because of the fact that now we weren't always this way. We used to think of human development more along the nature pieces and not always the nurture pieces. And now I think we do a better job of balancing. Vygotsky's kind of one of the first ones to kind of do that back when it wasn't cool to do that. He really kind of had this kind of strong socio-cultural, not just where you are, but like culturally speaking, like in the big scheme of things, culturally speaking, he began to start having a big emphasis on that. He's definitely a constructivist, which means socially we construct our meanings and our ideas from the social interactions that we have, not just from our cognitive construction. Okay, that's kind of important too. And those are a little bit different. One of them probably like Piaget is more like modern, like in modern thought. Social construction is more postmodern thought, right? Modern thought's more along the lines of like, hey, there's like an expert, there's a truth. Postmodern is like, hey, the expert's the person. There's still a truth, but it's a little t truth and it's my truth. That's where that kind of started a little bit. There's room for both of those, but that's where these start to interact. Language, Piaget's like, hey, minimal. It's mainly about cognition. And we could argue that. And again, these are theories. We could argue, cognition is what directs language. We can make that argument. Vygotsky says no. Language actually shapes thought. We could argue that too. The basic idea is that words matter, whether they come first from cognitions or first just from what we're speaking and then we think. It's probably a little bit of both, probably, especially in our world today where we can take in so many words, right? But we still hear them sometimes. I mean, like do you ever read a text and hear the person's voice? That's kind of what that is, right? No, sorry. And then this idea of teacher as a facilitator and guide, not a director. They both kind of see that pretty much the same way, which is I actually probably teach that way more than anything. I think that's probably right, and I think I actually kind of parent that way as well. But that's just the style. Again, these are theories. There's other theories. I just picked these two because they're kind of different in different ways, or come at things differently. One of the things that I really appreciate about Vygotsky is that how someone's culture plays a big role in their development. And that's really important. And culture plays a role in lots of different things, and especially, like how we cognitively develop, how we emotionally develop, how we socially develop. And so sometimes we develop certain traits, beliefs, values, behaviors because of the culture we're in. I'm using the word culture very broadly. It's a pretty big umbrella, and sometimes we can have our own beliefs that can, that aren't necessarily influenced by culture. That just that's maybe more personality. Can be both, can be a little bit of both kind of thing. And so this is just a couple of different ways to look at just development in general, especially when we start talking about cognitive development and how it's constructed. Now, one thing that I kind of got too far ahead. One thing about if we think about it neuropsych, like in a neuropsych theory way, it's a little bit different. And I'll just be honest, I'm a pretty big neuropsych theory person. This idea that, you focus on mental resources and looking at things like executive functioning, which executive functioning is action planning, setting goals, monitoring progress on tasks, starting things, finishing things, organizing, emotional regulation. So it's all the things that actually also impact ADHD is a executive functioning area. Executive functionings themselves take decades to develop and mature. So they take time. They take, our prefrontal cortex is not fully online until around 25 or 6. And that's kind of where a lot of the executive functioning is housed. So you don't have a lot of that online for a long time. And that's why a lot of times like sustained focus or sustained attention, well, as a side note, just because someone can't sustain focus necessarily or is very active doesn't mean they have ADHD. It just might mean they're very active. At the same time, when we start thinking about being able to stay focused and extend your engagement in a focused way, it starts to help you more academically, socially. It helps your self-esteem. But on the flip side of that, it also might mean that that piece of your executive function is just not quite online yet. It's just your brain might not be working in that way yet. And a lot of times that's why you'll hear clients, and maybe some of you have experienced times where you're like, I just didn't like school. I wasn't good at school. I didn't like school. It's probably because you had trouble focusing and extending that focus. Now, maybe you're better at it and maybe you can do it better. That's how it was for me. I didn't really care about school. I only got by because I was pretty smart and I could figure things out, but I didn't really try. I didn't really work hard. I didn't do it until I was in my mid-20s when I finally graduated. Now I have a PhD, and go figure. When I got through with high school, went straight to college. My second year had a 1.8 GPA, and I was like, well, this is stupid. I'm just wasting my money. So I just quit school. Now I have a PhD. I mean, that's how our brain can work, right? Like sometimes things come online later than others. And that just means our brain's wired that way. Does that make sense? I'm talking a whole lot. You guys have any questions about anything yet? We're going to jump into
I'm just glad to hear that because my son has ADD, and he is like what we were saying. He doesn't like school. He's in the high school now.
Yeah.
So I should have hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not who we can't look at any person necessarily as what they are, but what they're going to be.
Yeah.
Right. Which is very easy for me to say because I'm not his parent. It's hard for a parent though, to not look at their kid and go, oh crap, they're going to live with me forever. Right. I mean, it's hard. Right. But it doesn't usually happen that way. It's very rare. Actually, the only reason why kids move back home now is not because of anything to do with the brain or academics or smartness. It's because of economics. That's the key indicator of kids moving home. That's really the only reason why kids move home.
Yeah. But
yeah, to your point though, how old is he?
He's 17.
Yeah. So in about, this is going to sound horrible, 7 or 8 years, you're going to see a totally different, probably very different.
I hope.
Yeah. You will. And it's hard. And I think I have a bias too, because I have a son and daughter. They're just a grade apart. My daughter's experience in school and my son's experience in school are night and day different.
Total, yeah. I have the youngest that he is totally different.
Yeah. And some kids' brains are just wired differently. That's all. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm not even letting you guys ask. See, I'm trying to not get on rabbit trails. That's what we're trying to do. Trying to stick to my script.
Dr. Bernard, this is Mary. I'm wondering, because on your name there it is written LMFT. So, and my track is LMFT. I thought I should be able to talk to you face to face, to ask so many questions, not in the class.
Yeah. Okay. That's, I think, is anyone else doing LMFT? I'm just curious. If you're not, you fail. It's way harder. It's a lot harder to get your hours anyway. Yeah. LMFT is basically a systems approach. You'll learn about a lot of this in other classes, but yeah, that's but you know what, Mary, I can send you some resources from the
Yes, sir.
Texas Marriage and Family Therapy Organization that's really, really super helpful.
Yes, sir.
And I'll send those to you. Shoot me an email and remind me, and
I
I'll send
will.
you some information.
I will.
I want to talk about parenting styles because that's going to be our next group discussion. Okay. I thought I had a page. Ooh, I'm not. Yeah. So there's 4 styles in general: authoritative, authoritarian, indulgent, and neglectful. This is kind of a good little chart to look at parenting styles like demanding and controlling. If you have accepting and responsive, you kind of have that authoritative. Accepting and responsive, but undemanding and uncontrollative, you can have indulgent. And then reject. The 2 on the right are probably the most difficult to unlearn and probably don't get the best results necessarily. Indulgent's not great either. Authoritative is kind of the sweet spot. And keep in mind, these are all on a continuum too, when we talk about parenting. And this is all based on, like mounds of research in terms of parenting styles. Sometimes what I hear clients talk about is if it's anything less than authoritarian parenting, it's too lax, it's too chaotic, there's no structure, there's no boundaries, and that's actually absolutely not true. Authoritarian parenting is a lot more fear-based and guilt-driven, and it works 100% of the time. It'll work. It doesn't have great long-term effects. Authoritative parenting has better long-term effects, but takes a lot more creativity and a little more energy on the front end, for sure.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
Would you consider that authoritarian, like gentle parenting? I know that's something that people are using more nowadays. So I just want to know, like, what's your thoughts on gentle parenting?
I have no idea what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I could answer it, but I have no idea what gentle parenting is. I don't know if that means, I don't know what that means.
It's like a new term that they're using nowadays. I guess instead of using like the specific terms, they use like gentle parenting. So I guess it's like lighter parenting, if that makes sense. I know it's just a new term that they use.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, then the 70s and 80s parenting was uber light. I didn't have adults around me ever. I don't even know how I'm alive. Like, me and my friends did stupid, crazy stuff. So I'll tell you from my perspective, like what we're going to talk about is like like a lot of clinical terms, right? We're going to talk about it in terms of clinical usage, but their clients don't care about these terms, right? So being able to translate this into terminology they can understand is helpful. So light parenting might be one of these. I have no idea, right? That might be true.
Gotcha.
I have no idea.
So what I've always heard gentle parenting described as is more of a positive reinforcement as opposed to a negative reinforcement style of parenting.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right.
So
Yeah.
not how you and I were raised. We were
Probably
feral
not.
children. It's more probably closer to that 70s, 80s style of parenting.
Yeah,
Feral
probably.
children.
Yeah. Latchkey. Yeah. And
Yes.
mine wasn't mean. It was just both my parents worked.
Mine wasn't mean. It was just, it's summer,
was.
you're outside.
Yeah.
That's
My
how
parents-
it was.
My parents would take us at 9, 10, 11 years old, me and a bunch of my friends, and drop us off at the local golf course. And we just stay there all day. I'm sure we just drove all the people crazy there. We swim, go play golf, go get in the pond and get golf balls. We go buy food and put it on our account. I mean, that was just like That's what we did. I can't imagine if I dropped my kids off, like they wouldn't even know what to do. You know, it's totally different. And I'm bringing these 4 specific styles up just as a way of saying, hey, this is what the research tells us a lot about these things. We can choose to follow it or not, and our clients will choose to follow it or not. Most clients that you work with don't come in going necessarily asking for help with parenting per se. They want you to change their kid more than anything, without thinking that maybe they need to change their parenting potentially. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that in their defense, that sometimes people feel overwhelmed with their kids. That happens too. And I learned a long time ago, when we start talking about these styles, and if you'll notice, I'm doing it myself. Don't throw people's parents under the bus. They did the best they could too. That's not, because guess what? Your kids are going to do. If you do that, that's what your kids are going to do. So you got to be mindful of those things too. Here's what I'd like for you to talk about in your groups. You can use these terms if you want. Doesn't matter to me what terms you use. I just would like for you to talk with each other, because we have a kind of a wide range of folks. I'd like for you to talk about parenting style in your group and just give some examples of parenting style. If you feel comfortable, you don't have to, don't have to share anything, but just talk with each other a little bit about like how your parents parented you. And have you or will you parent that way? If so, why? And if not, why not? So I'm going to put you back in your groups. We'll do this we're going to do this for a little bit longer, so it might take a little bit longer. We'll get back over here. Go. All right. See, I see what everybody does. They turn the video on when you're in groups, and then you turn it off when you're back in the big group. At least that's what a lot of my classes do. I like to see everybody. Okay. We're going to stop the lecture pieces here. We're going to stop. This is a good stopping point. And the parenting stuff, we're actually going to pick up again. We're going to talk about it more when we get to adolescence. So I'm going to stop here tonight, because I do want to save some time for any questions that you might have. And that can be about class tonight too, but it can be about assignments or anything. If you don't have any questions and you're done for the night and you want to jump off, you can, no problem. But if you want to stay on and ask questions, I'll stay as long as I can. But I just wanted to give time to ask questions. So you can go or stay, doesn't matter to me. But who's got questions?
Assignment, the assignment number 2, I didn't see what it is. What we're supposed to do.
It's the same thing you did for the first one. You do 3 of those.
Actually, Dr. Bernard, I have a question about it. I just got my book yesterday, and I started looking the book, and I think I didn't understand it well. Was supposed to work in the chapter 1, chapter 2 for the exercise 1.
It doesn't matter what chapter you do.
Oh.
You can do any chapter, but if you did chapter 1 or 2, that's great.
Yeah, I didn't understand. So in the exercise 2 is the same. I can work it. Anything?
Yeah, anything, any chapter. Yep. Because
okay.
everybody reads at different speeds, and everybody's going to be on different chapters. So it doesn't matter to me what chapter you pick.
And the exercise, don't you follow in the classes? Don't you? I don't know how to ask that. Like today you talk about the childhood, so the exercise is related to the childhood.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No. Think about it this way: there's 17 chapters in the book, right? And we just covered several right? So like, it doesn't, like you, when we next meet is in a couple of weeks, right? When is it? When do we meet again? The 13th? Some people might be in chapter 6. Some people might be in chapter 4 reading. I mean, everybody's going to be at different spots. So the assignments can be done from any of those sections in any chapter.
Okay, okay. And then when we post that, we need to post like attachment or in the messaging.
In the messaging, in the forum. Yeah, actually
Okay.
write something in the forum. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I should, sorry again,
No,
I
you're
should be able
fine.
to see the others exercise or not.
So all the exercises, the instructions are exactly the same for all the assignments. You'll turn in something to me, and then you'll make a post on the forum.
Okay. Okay.
So like exercise 2 that you turn into me is due July 1st. Exercise 3 the part that you turn into me is due July 22nd.
July
And all-
22nd.
Mhm.
Ah, hmm.
Can I ask a follow-up
Sure.
question to, so we can choose any part of the book for these two, what we choose for each exercise, correct? For part A.
Correct.
And then part
Mhm.
B, is part B always going to be a follow-up? Like those questions, like I'm looking at it for exercise 1, what lifespan stage did you choose? Does it just correlate to what we actually wrote about for exercise 1? Because if we
Mhm.
chose like one of the first couple of chapters, it's not necessarily a specific stage.
Yeah, and you could just write what you reflected on. Like forum number 2's got, what did you learn from this exercise? What roles does social and emotional development play in stages you chose? Blah, 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 blah. Then at the
Okay.
forum for 3 has got, forum for 3 has got, how do we distinguish between when a person goes from adolescence to adulthood? Because I'm assuming by then, probably we've already kind of gotten that far.
Okay, so the forum questions aren't necessarily related to what we're writing about in part A.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think the reason this assignment is confusing because it's actually really simple, and no one's used to it being really simple. And guys, I'm really super easygoing too.
No, I think you're very right. It's very simple, and I think it's throwing everybody off.
Yeah.
As far as like the formatting of the papers that we turn in, do you want it to be all APA formatting, or is it more?
You don't have to. I always encourage people to do it just to get used to doing it, but you don't have to. It's up to you.
Okay, because I was
I
wondering.
used to make people do it, but I don't want to fight that battle.
APA is double spacing, so I don't know if that mattered with the 2 to 3 page thing. Like I didn't want to.
Nah, it's really a short answer. It's only a short answer assignment. And I already know where you're getting unless you guys want to go outside the book and answer the questions, then I would need you to reference it, right? But other than that, I know where you're getting your answers.
And do you want us to state the questions in the bodies and then answer it?
You
So that
can.
you have context?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor,
Yes.
all the questions are supposed to be done within 2 to 3 pages.
I would love it. That would be
Okay,
awesome.
and it's over just 2 chapters, correct?
It's over you can find 2 review, connect, reflect sections in one chapter and just do it out of one chapter.
Okay,
Like every chapter has 2 or 3 of those sections in it.
okay, last question, because I see several hands raised.
No, you're okay.
When in the form you're saying post to, we're just answering the question that's in that form.
In the forum. That's correct.
We're not copying and pasting any of our paper into the form.
No. I want you to
Okay,
write something.
Okay, I was just asking because I had a professor that made us do that. Post
Oh,
our
no.
questions and answers so people can respond back to it.
Oh, man. Can you imagine reading 2 or 3 pages every forum post? Y'all be reading that for a week.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Just write
And
something.
do we respond back to another
Yep.
student?
Yep.
And do you have a limit or two?
It doesn't matter. I don't care.
You don't care, and you don't care about the minimum? How
do
much we
not.
respond?
I
Okay,
do not, because I can't keep track of it, and I don't want to. I'm just being honest. Y'all, it's like almost 9. I'm like, I don't want to keep track of it. Y'all can. I'm going to trust that you're going to do it. And honestly, to be honest with you, I've never had students not do it. It really, I think the forum discussions are some of the better parts of this class, personally. So I won't
Okay.
keep track. There's no minimum. You just do however many you want.
okay, awesome. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Dr. Bedard,
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of follow up again with what Gabriella said. I
Mhm.
thought I heard you say that you're not uploading a document for the exercise, but I was writing mine on like Word and then was going to upload a document.
On the forum, you don't upload it.
But on the exercises, you do.
Correct. And there's a little thing that says turn into me. You
Right.
click that link and you can load it up.
Okay, good. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. And I would prefer Word documents over anything else, but that just because it's easier.
Oh, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a very silly question, and I apologize in advance for that.
And we're gonna laugh. Then we're all gonna laugh. Everybody's gonna laugh.
I live in California, so I'm on Pacific
Yeah.
time. When you say it's due anytime Saturday,
Yeah.
is it by Central Time, midnight, or do I have until 11:59 my time?
So you have until 2 a.m. Central.
Okay. Sounds
No
good.
problem. Yeah. Where do you live
Thank
in
you. I just
California?
wanted to clarify.
Where in California?
Los Angeles.
Okay. My wife's in Redding right now,
Okay.
which is way north of you, but she's flying through Los Angeles tomorrow, actually.
Yep. It's an interesting place to live. I'll say that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. That's not a dumb question. That's not funny. That's good.
I had a
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
My next, first, I apologize, I was late. So if you've already answered this question, sorry. I wanted to ask about the exam. You mentioned in the last meeting that it was gonna go from like 75 questions to a lower amount.
Yeah, like 25.
Okay, and that would be for the midterm and the final? Okay,
That's right.
and then just one more and that's it.
Yeah.
The paper that we have to write on, I'm trying to find, you know what, I'm brainstorming.
Mm-hmm.
And so the degree that I'm pursuing is a school counselor
Yep.
and early childhood. Can you give me any topics that will be useful or that are most common in students that are 10 years old and below? Or maybe like before preteen?
Mm-hmm. Any mental health issue you can think of.
Any
Like
mental health?
any mental health disorder you can think of. Probably the most common what people write about is either like dyslexia or ADHD or things like that. But you could write about depression or anxiety or yeah, I mean basically any mental health disorder you could
Okay.
probably write about. I don't think I would giving you those big ones because that's where you're going to find probably the most information research wise. It'd be easy to
Okay.
find, stuff on that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is, do you know any school counselors?
Yes.
I would ask them what you just asked me. Ask them what they see.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Dr. Chris, I'm going
Yeah.
to ask, I think I'm also feeling like I'm asking dumb question, like if I'm repeating myself, but when I go to the forum here, when I look at second week, which we are supposed to do exercise 1, and then it says that this is 2 to 3 page portion of the assignment due. Did you say that we are going to write from the topics that we have learned, or are we going to pick any that of them we write to you, or we like a summary, or what you understand?
So see what I'm highlighting here,
Yes, sir.
right? This is what you turn into me. I've already got
Yeah.
4 of them,
Yeah.
right? This is the forum. She'll click on this and there'll be some questions here,
Okay.
and you just click add, and then you write your answer right here, and then
Yes.
you post it.
Yes. What about that number 2? That one I understand them because there is something to, it is in directive. What about the week 2? What am I going to write about? Week 2, this week now, like there, number
this
1,
is- so
exercise
this is-
1.
So this is number 1, right? Here's
Uh-huh.
number 2, same assignment, different sections, right?
Oh.
Here's forum number 2, different questions.
Okay. Okay.
Does that
All
make
right.
sense?
I hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, you just don't you guys don't overthink it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, don't overthink it. But if that doesn't make sense, tell me. Seriously.
No, I understand because what I see is that I'm trying to go back because you are sharing. I can't see my document. On the when you talk about wiki 2, when you talk about part 1, it's the same as wiki 3, and wiki 4 is the same as wiki 5. Only that one we are going to send it to you. The other one we are going to share with and converse with our colleagues.
I don't really understand which piece. So each exercise has 2 parts. You'll turn one part into me, and then you'll post on the forum.
Okay.
You'll do that 3 times. Exercise 1, exercise 2, and exercise 3.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does now.
I feel like I'm making it more confusing.
No. No, yeah, I'm good now.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
Dr. Chris, this is Toshiba.
Yeah.
This is a simple question. So you said you don't care about how many posts we respond to. So like next week I'm going on vacation. I will not have access to
We can't hear you.
We lost you.
internet. So I will not be able to post, reply to anyone, but I do plan on at least making a comment. Oh. Okay,
Yeah,
can you hear
now
me
we
now?
have difficulty hearing.
If you just post sometime before you leave.
Can you hear
you
me?
probably- yeah, it's delayed by like 10 seconds.
How about now?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
just post anytime before you leave. It's fine. You can do it tonight.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. Now, everybody can go do something else. I'm going to go put my groceries away. So I just had groceries delivered. How about that?
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
all.